All right, shall we get started? Cool, my name is Rouan. I'm a software developer at a company called Tez. It's based in London. Basically, we do a few different things, but the biggest thing that we do is we run the biggest website for teachers in the UK. So it's where teachers go to find jobs, and it's where schools go to find teachers. And it's also where teachers share lessons with each other. It's kind of like Stack Overflow for teachers, sharing resources with each other. And I'm here today to talk to you about the curious case of the production incident. So the whole idea behind this talk is to chat a little bit about bugs and to demystify them a little bit, talk about how they're not really as bad as you might think they are, and talk about kind of modern and good ways of dealing with them, finding them, and kind of getting to the bottom of the health of your system. So it sounds good. If it sounds good to you. And yeah, feel free to stop me with questions if you have any. Let's go. So the first thing to talk about is what we are talking about when we talk about a production incident. So what is an incident? There are a few different kinds of things that may be defined as an incident. Sorry, this is my only definey kind of slide, but let's get through it. Something where your system is not functional, right? This is the most common thing. It doesn't do what it says on the tin. Something's broken. Another issue that you might have is that it's not performant. So you are not coping with the load that you have on your system, and things are falling over. Another incident you might have is that it's not secure. So you might have a data breach. Someone stole a bunch of information that belongs to you, or might have tricked some of your users into doing things that they didn't want to do. And lastly, another incident you might have is that your site is not easy to use. This is one that's often overlooked, but if your shopping cart is difficult to use, no one's going to buy anything and your business is going to go bang. So that's another important one to think about. And the reason I use the word incident, even though it's a little bit dry, instead of using the word bug, is because bugs have negative connotations. People think of bugs as mistakes that someone has made. So I was meant to code it in a certain way, I coded it in the wrong way, now we have a bug. And really what I'm going to try and show you today as we talk about this is that the incidents that crop up in production are often more learning opportunities than they are mistakes. I mean, how many of you here have had an incident in production where you've learned something about your system that you didn't know before? You couldn't have predicted that was going to be an issue. Yeah? Okay. So I guess I just want to point out that having bugs or having incidents is a natural part of the software development workflow. I worked at a company once where the head of the software department decided that the goal for the software department is going to be to have 0 defects, which felt a little odd to all of us at the time. And the reason for that is because it's not realistic. You're not going to have a system that's perfect. And if you do, something is wrong. All right, so we're here to talk about murder mysteries, and here is our dead body. How many people here watch or have watched Midsummer Murders? Oh, there's like one person. I love it. It's like, if you haven't watched it before, it's very British. It's like 3 hours long per episode. It's basically the test cricket of series. It's a little bit boring. It takes a very long time, but there's just something really, really magical about it. Okay, anyway, so we've got a dead body. That's not great. And what we're going to talk about first is how we find out about that dead body. Because the first thing that happens as a detective is we get the phone call. Okay, anyone know who that is? That's Dick Tracy. He's got a little Apple Watch, right? Even though it was 1990 something. Anyways, so the first thing that happens is you get the angry phone call from the user. I mean, how many people have been around when the product owner or your boss runs into the room and says, I've just had like a really angry phone call from a user? Do you not talk to users? No? Okay. Well, this happens when someone comes and says, we've had a major bug that we didn't know about. It's because someone phoned and they were angry. They might have emailed or hit a this isn't working button or something like that, but we've got an angry user. How many people here work at a corporate, like a big bank or something, yeah? Has anyone ever had the email thread that comes to your desk that like started at the desk of, super important investments holdings, who emailed the CEO of whatever bank you're working at and says, this isn't working, this is outrageous, fix this now. And even though it's like the smallest bug that doesn't really matter because it came from the CEO of someone that someone plays golf with, it kind of trickles down to your desk and you urgently have to do something about it. Anyways, so chapter 1 of our story is how to find the body. So yes, sometimes we get the phone call. Who here watched Murder, She Wrote? Yes! That's Jessica Fletcher, if you don't know. She is a very intrepid detective. She's basically a nosy grandma asking people lots of questions and then using a computer. I'll show you a picture later. Okay. Right, so that's the most common way that we find out about an issue. But what we're really hoping for is that we want to find out before the phone rings, right? So there's a cool book here. If anyone can tell me what movie that's from, I'll give you the book. Ooh. It's a Hitchcock movie? Oh, no. It's pretty close. It's from Dial M for Murder. Okay, cool. So here are a number of ways that we can find out that something is wrong with our system before we get the phone call. And the reason this is important is for 2 reasons. One is that you can minimize the impact if you know about it early, right? Ideally, you'll know about an issue before any users have even noticed. And I'm going to try and show you some of the techniques you can use to get there. And the second reason is because not all users call. So you may be losing users to competition without even knowing about it. People will just quietly move on to something else. All right, so the first set of techniques, I've just got a heading for them. We're not going to talk about them today. These are the ones that you know all about, and they're pre-production techniques, right? So this is writing automated tests, having a little script that checks to see whether you have libraries in your project that are known to be vulnerable. This is that guy who always comes and tells you that your code isn't working. Sometimes we call them a QA, right? All of those really good things that happen before things go to production. That's really good. Keep doing that. That's a wonderful way of finding issues. But like I said, most of your production defects that really matter are going to be surprises. And if there's surprises, there's no way that this stuff is going to help you, right? Because this is all about documenting what the system does, right? I've made the system to do X. Can you please check that it's doing X? I'll check if it's doing X. I've got some tests that'll do check if it's doing X, right? But X might be wrong, and we don't know. So it's all the other stuff that I think is really important to focus on. Okay, so step 1, ask some friendly people. That's not a scene from the Agile Manifesto. That's from Hot Fuzz. How many people have watched Hot Fuzz? Yeah, okay, cool. So this is all about the greater good. The 3 things I've got here are canary releases, beta groups, and A/B testing. So canary releases is basically when you send out a tiny little bit of your software out into the world to see whether it falls over or not. So this is the whole thing about canaries used to get taken down into mines, and if they died, everyone quickly ran up, had a small funeral for the canary, and were happy that they weren't involved any further than they were. So that's a useful way of trying to see whether you have issues with your code. Just kind of test out a concept in a small kind of isolated pocket. Another way of doing this is having beta groups. So Facebook is famous for being very good at this kind of thing. So essentially, you are a little bit bolder about releasing software. And instead of releasing it to everyone, you release to some trusted closed groups who check your code, who use your new features day to day, as any other user does. But they give you feedback quickly. How many people here use an editor like VS Code or something and are in like the beta stream, or Docker and they're in the beta stream or something like that? Yeah? I'm not. You guys are braver than I am. But that's another great way, right, of kind of offering back feedback and getting feedback from your users. And A/B testing is another good way as well, right? So if you're not sure if something has an issue, you could try out 2 different versions and see what works out best. An extension of these is eating your own dog food. Have you heard this expression before? Cool, okay. So if, for example, you were an online retailer, you should give all of your employees like $500 a month to spend on your shop on whatever they want, right? Because they're going to use your shop and see if there are issues, right? You want people finding bugs, get them to use your website. You know, the banks are really good at this. They say, cool, you can come and work for us, but your salary goes into a Standard Bank or Nedbank or whatever bank account at the end of every month. So you're banking with us, and you come and tell us if things are wrong. Facebook's good at this as well. Everyone who works there kind of uses Facebook, like they use it as like a company tool, right? So you'll have a team group or whatever. Another way that's often overlooked, how many people have ever looked at some code and gone, how does this work? It doesn't look like it should work. And then they've poked around a little bit and found out, yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah, has that happened to people? Yeah, okay. Trust your gut, follow those little paths and see what's going on, because I've definitely discovered lots of production issues this way. And it might be that it's something that is happening to a lot of people and you just haven't noticed. Another way that we can find out is, and this is not done as often as it should be, by open sourcing your code. So now if you run super top secret, very awesome hedge financing software, you're not going to want to open source your core algorithm that makes you all your money. But you may very well have a bunch of like really hairy date code that parses dates for you or something. And you've managed to get that working. If you open source it, what's going to happen is other people are going to use it. They're going to make it better for you for free. So that's kind of handy. Secondly, your code will be less bloated because you've managed to pull a nice dependency out. And thirdly, and I think very importantly, is other people are going to find your bugs and tell you about them, and not only tell you about them, but fix them for you. So it's an often overlooked little free economy out there that companies don't take advantage of. So find small, and it doesn't have to, I'm not saying, you know, if you run a CMS, you know, like pull out your whole CMS and open source it. I'm just saying that I guarantee you there are small libraries that you can make out of little bits of utility code that you use. And it's often things like dealing with dates and numbers and colors and whatever that everyone does. No one really cares about whether other people can see their code. And you can get a lot from it. All right. So something else which I think is something that we do in our teams and is very, very valuable is an empty log policy. So how many people here look at the logs of their application once a week? Okay, cool. Everyone should put up their hands. The ones who didn't put up their hands, why didn't you look? Is it because there was just too much stuff there? No? Is it because you don't have access? Now that I can't help you with. Get access. But the problem is that logs tend to be very noisy, and you can have heaps and heaps of errors in your logs. And then honestly, how are you going to make any sense of it? Your signal to noise ratio is all wrong. You have no way of understanding which line of your log indicates a problem. So the way that we do this is that we have a number of different log levels, but the three that we're interested in most often are errors, warnings, and info, right? You guys are all familiar with those standard log levels, right? Make them work for you. So in our team, you can have as much info logs as you want. Those logs are full. There are 10,000 entries in there every day, whatever. No one ever really looks at them unless something's happened and we need to go and dig around. Your warning logs. I would say that if you have more than 5 or 10 logs in your warning logs every day, that's too much. So, you know, there are going to be warnings. And I mean, look, maybe you've got an application where every once in a while someone tries to access something that they shouldn't, and you've got a 403 that pops up in your warning logs. That's great, that's fine. But if you have 10,000 of those, you probably have a UX issue that you need to go and sort out. So it's really good to try and limit that. And then your error logs should be empty. If there is a single entry in your error logs, you should know about it and you should care about it because it indicates a real problem. Now, getting there can be quite tricky because it can be a long process. And basically, if you have very, very noisy logs, they're not meaning anything to you right now. So the best advice I can give you, even though it might feel a bit wrong, is stop logging all your errors that you're currently logging because you're not looking at those logs anyway, and start clean. Start getting your logs and really care about them. I mean, if you wanted to, you could introduce like a severe log level to kind of jump above the noise that you already have and kind of just focus one tier higher. But it'll depend on your individual situation. Jessica Fletcher, everybody. Right, so again, I'm just going to reiterate something here, which is that I don't want you to be scared of bugs. I want you to see them as learning opportunities and as an opportunity for you to play detective. Because I feel like for a lot of us, when there is a production incident, it's because someone has come to us, said something is wrong, we're on the back foot, we're panicked, we're trying to get things fixed. And the techniques that I'm trying to share with you today are basically all about not being on the back foot. It's about being really proactive, being really on top of things. And when someone comes to you and says, hey, there's this issue, you can say, yeah, noticed it, fixed it this morning, it'll be in production in a couple of hours. And it's a much less stressful way of dealing with bugs. So the next couple of techniques are the ones that I think I have found most helpful. So the one is dashboards. So who here has a working space where you've got some monitors up and you've got some graphs and numbers up around you? Okay, so some, yeah, got a little cluster over there. Here's the thing. A lot of developers don't know what makes the application that they work on tick. And even if they know in an abstract sense, we don't always have a clear indication of whether the website, sorry, I'm saying website, that's what I build, right? Excuse me. Medical equipment, whatever it is you're building. If you're listening to if you're building medical equipment, don't listen to anything I say. I build websites. It's fast and loose over there. Just please don't kill anyone because of the like post-production techniques don't really make sense for medical devices. That's just not going to go well for you. Do all the pre-production techniques you need to for medical devices. But if, like me, you build websites or like apps or something a little bit less dire, it's important to dashboard some metrics that are important to your application. So there are some technical metrics which you can dashboard quite easily, especially if you use tools like New Relic and whatever. They'll give you these dashboards for free. Or not for free, you pay for them, but they'll do the work for you. You know, things like response times and error rates, kind of unhandled exceptions, things like that, you might be able to get quite easily, and those are kind of technical metrics. But I want you to focus on business metrics as well. So if, for example, you do run an online store, you should have a number of what your conversion rate is at various points in your shopping process, right? So 60% of people who put an item in their basket go on and buy that item. And 20% of people who look at an item end up putting it in their basket, right? And you get a picture of what your flow looks like, and you can graph that. And what's really handy about that is that if you see that every day, you get a feeling for the heartbeat of your application. So one of the applications I look after is one that deals with timesheeting for teachers. So teachers submit their timesheets, and the schools come and approve them so they can get paid. These are supply teachers, like substitute teachers. And there's a real definite cadence to how that works, right? We send out reminder emails to the schools on Fridays, and on Friday mornings we have a huge spike in our application. So our usage goes up by like 1,000 on a Friday, because that's when everyone's approving timesheets, right? And your application will also have its own natural pulse or heartbeat. And dashboards are a great way for you and your team to understand it, to see it every day, to feel it, right? It's like knowing when you leave your house, you know, I mean, I guess you've got Google Maps now, but if you can see that there's, you know, a couple too many cars down the road to the left, you know you should just turn right because there's going to be a mess over there, right? You get a sense for what's happening in your neighborhood and what things look like, and dashboarding is very similar. And also, some people will tell you that there are really impressive like AI techniques. You can crunch your data and you can find out what's wrong with your application, or you know what the trends are, and that's true. But human brains are pretty good too, and you'll find that well, not for free, you pay humans, I guess, but you'll find that you'll notice things. You'll notice little dips and trends. So like for example, on a Friday morning, I don't see a big spike. I get worried. And you might get a similar worry if, I don't know, on Friday morning not everyone's logging into their banking or something like that, because it might indicate some sort of issue. Right, and one way in order to get this kind of dashboarding, this is what we do, is we do something called metrics with Datadog. So it's like a third-party cloud provider, and essentially what we do is we send little numbers off to them all the time. So someone approves a timesheet, little number goes off into the sky and gets put onto a little dashboard somewhere. And it's pretty simple. You can build your own quite easily if you wanted to, right? Just have a server somewhere that you send all these little ticks to. And another thing that we do with those ticks is automated alerting. And if there is nothing that you take away today, take away, like in terms of tools, take this away with you. Find a way to get automated alerting for your application. So here's the thing. In life, in general, we are more likely to do something if someone comes and asks us or taps us on the shoulder, right? We're more likely to notice a problem if it's kind of like, you know, like that dock icon at the bottom of your Mac, just like jumping up and trying to get your attention. And the way that we do this is that we send specific kind of error metrics, and then on Datadog you set up a monitor that looks at those metrics and has a threshold. So it says, okay, cool, if I get more than even just one of these, because it's a critical issue, I'm going to shout at you. And we get a message in HipChat, or you might use Slack, or email, or phones, or whatever it is that works for you and your team. Something where your team will be so that you get notified. Now, you don't want too many of these. It's the same kind of thing as the logs. You don't want too much noise, right? So if one of these pops up, it should be something that you really do care about and want to do something about it. If you're just getting started with this, the advice that I can give you is figure out what are the core aspects of your product that you're busy building. What are the things that make or break it, you know? So for example, for timesheeting, if no timesheets get approved, it's not good. That's what we care about. For you, it might be something different, right? It might be the amount of money that gets transacted on a banking site. It might be the number of products sold on a online shopping site. So those are the kinds of things that you want to look out for, and start there. And make sure that whenever something goes wrong, you get alerted so that you know about it and you and your team can go and fix it. Sorry, I really love this. I put these slides together quite late at night, so I think this is hilarious. Anyways, so that's chapter 1. Chapter 1 is all about how do we actually discover that dead body, right? And short of someone giving us a phone call, we can try and be proactive detectives who kind of know about issues before everyone else does, right? We kind of step quietly into the drawing room with the butler and see the dead body, as opposed to waiting until everybody else knows. Okay, so now we've got a murder or a mystery on our hands. And now chapter 2 is all about gathering the clues. And this is all about finding out more about what it is that has gone wrong. Who here watches Law and Order Criminal Intent, or did back when it was on TV? No? Anyone remember this guy? He was like really intense. And this is a scene of him interrogating someone. And he used to like really get into people's heads and kind of like get them to blurt out their confessions. I guess that's not really that unusual for TV detectives, but he was particularly good at it. So lean on your suspects. When you think that something is wrong, do what you can to find out more about it. So obviously, if the thing that's wrong is your homepage is down, right, you're going to have to go dig around and see what's going on. But very often what you have is you have a more elusive issue. So for example, you might notice that you're having more 403 status codes returned by one of your routes than you might like. Or you find that you're often getting duplicate data from users in a very short space of time. And it kind of indicates that something is wrong, but there's no obvious indicator of what exactly it is that's not working. And it can be hard because the real world is really complicated. I mean, we write code at our desks, but in the world out there, I mean, the stuff users get up to and computer networks get up to, it's really very unpredictable. And there's all sorts of stuff that could go wrong depending on the connection and where people are and what they're doing and what else they're doing at the same time and what they've just done and where they've just come from. It can make quite a big difference. So I would urge you again not to panic when you see something like this going on, which I think actually most people don't do. The most natural inclination is just to go and move on, which is probably fine. But I would encourage you to have a high standard for the application that you're busy building and to care about what it is that might be fishy, because you might discover something that would make quite a big difference if you fixed it. And so the way that I like to approach this is, okay, cool, the issue happened. Let's see if we can get any information by looking through the logs or looking at our database, trying to see what it is that we can understand or garner from what's happened. And usually, in this particular scenario, you won't be able to understand that much. You might have a hunch of what might be wrong. And so when you have that hunch, what you can do is think to yourself, if this happened again, what extra information would be useful to have? And then find a way to make that information available to you the next time that it happens. So, really simple example, something really weird happened, a user submitted something twice, and what would be really helpful to know is which user it was, because at the moment from the logs I can't see which user it was, right? So you add a little bit of code to log the user ID, you push that to production, and you move on with your life. So now you haven't fixed the issue, you've just lent on that suspect a little bit. You've just made it a little bit more likely that you're going to get an answer. And what's going to happen is one of two things. One, the issue never happens again. In which case you haven't wasted days of your life on it, right? You also move on, and kind of no harm, no foul. The second thing is that it happens again. In which case you might get enough information to solve the issue, or you might get another hunch as to what it might be, right? And then you might log some more information. And the more you do this, the more you kind of get into how your code behaves in production, the more your understanding grows of your application. And my contention is that your only way of really understanding whether your system is of high quality is by paying attention to it in production. And that's why I'm a big fan of all of these techniques. All right. Another thing that you can do, that's Jessica Fletcher on the computer. At the end of every episode, she used to type up the story. Anyways, so a classic thing that all, this is clearly funnier to me than it is to anyone else. But you know what, I'm not going to back down. There are more. I mean, I know I can't change the slides, but I'm still going to be similarly enthusiastic about them. So a classic detective move is to get statements from all the witnesses and from all the suspects and get as much information from them. It's basically about getting people's stories, right, to see if everything ties together and see where the issue might be. And so another technique that we use, which initially, be prepared, sounds very boring, is actually very useful and not so boring when you're starting to do it. And it's called auditing. And the basic idea is that in addition to keeping a store of data, right, so you have a database full of customer information and you've got another table which has a bunch of information about invoices or something exciting, I don't know. What's an exciting thing you might have in a table? Don't say sweets. The trick is to keep some metadata as well. So, for example, when some data is initially created, don't only store the data, store in your audit table or collection a little bit of data that says, cool, something was created. This is the ID we gave it when it was created. This is who created it. This is what time they created it. Just a little bit of metadata about what it is that happened. And you might end up with something like this. So this is just a screenshot of some data in Mongo. So this is for these things called shifts. A shift is like an 8-hour block that a teacher might work for a school. And what you can see here is you can see the ID of the actual audit collection, so you can ignore that. You can see when it happened. You can see the type of the audit. So it's a created, right? It was created, then that first one. There's an ID for that shift, so ABC123. And we keep a bunch of details. So in this particular instance, we integrate with Salesforce. The initial chunk of information comes through from Salesforce, and we shove that into our database. And that original message that we got from Salesforce, we stick in here as well. And then the second item there is when the timesheet was approved. And you can see in the details, you can see which user was the one who approved it. And in the third one over there, you can see that someone updated it. And we keep a track of the previous state, as well as the new data that came through about it. And there are some more things that happened. So this information is really useful because step one, an alert goes off. Something went wrong. Then, because you've got good logging in your application, you head over to the logs. And it's not very hard to find what you're looking for because there's not a lot of stuff in there. And you look through the logs and you can see, okay, great. The bad thing that happened, you happened to shift ABC123. And then you might say, okay, cool, it's not immediately obvious what it is that went wrong here. Where did something drop off? And then you're going to go and search your audit collection for ABC123, and you're going to get a little story like this. And that is going to tell you exactly what's happened to this particular piece of data as it's moved through your system. And you're going to be able to have a lot more information at your disposal to try and fix the problem. And what's particularly cool about this is in those situations where you don't have logging information or any sort of alerting, and it's just kind of basically someone came up to you and said, hey, I've just had a phone call, user blah blah has a problem with ABC123. Like, where has it dropped off? What's gone wrong? And you can go and have a look here. Because you might also have a good understanding of the life cycle of what happens to a shift, or whatever the thing may be. And it might be that, the first thing happened, the second thing happens, third thing happened, and there is no audit entry for the fourth thing. So for some reason, the fourth thing didn't happen. And there's a very easy way for you to go and find the right place in the code to start looking for that bug. All right, another technique that I think is really useful for trying to find all the clues is doing a background check, right? So this is they always do in the detective shows. They go and they look up someone's details and they say, yes, okay, cool, they've had priors. And the way that I find very useful of doing this is by using whatever issue tracking system it is that you use at your work, right? So you might use Trello or like GitHub or whatever the thing is that you use to keep track of the work that you're busy doing and moving around, whether it's physical index cards or Jira or whatever it is. Make a note of when an issue happens, because you can go back in time and do a quick search, if your tool's any good, to see when it's happened before, what had happened, what did we do about it, what did we think about it. And that's a really useful way of kind of trying to get more information when you're busy trying to deal with one of these issues. Okay, cool. So, chapter 3, trust your squad. This is all about how we deal with these issues as a team. Yep, hot fuzz. So number one, bring backup. If you're going to be working on a production issue, it's really, really helpful to pull someone else in to come and sit next to you, right? Or if, like me, you work remotely, we hop onto a call and we do it that way. But it's very, very helpful because, first of all, it helps put you at ease, right? I'm in this with somebody. There's no need for me to flail or panic. And the second reason it's helpful is that it shares information about this kind of issue, right? Because the next time someone else is dealing with a similar issue, you're like, oh yeah, I was sitting next to John, we were looking at that together, and actually, yeah, I know kind of what to do here. And another thing that's really important is to share stories about production issues. So you might find that you go and you deal with an issue, but then you never tell anyone about it. And so it's really, really useful if you have team stand-ups maybe, you can just mention, hey, there was this issue, this is what was wrong, this is what I did to deal with it, or this is what I think is wrong, this is the extra logging I added, so the next time it comes around, if any of you see it, go and look at the log, you should be able to find the user ID now. Another thing that's really useful is if you have really big outages, the home page is down, your payment system's down, something like that, is to have a post-mortem written up. And, developers, we kind of get a bit nervous when we talk about writing things down, but it can be really, really helpful to just jot down a little wiki page, kind of like one page summarizing what it is that went wrong, what it is we did to fix it, and what we put in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. And you can even just kind of gather your team and just talk through that together, because it can be super helpful to try and increase awareness of the kinds of issues that you have. Remember that what I'm talking about here is learning more about the quality of your system through seeing what's happening in production. And it's no good if only one person is doing that and isn't telling anyone else about it. Everyone's awareness of what a good system looks like needs to increase over time. Okay, so support rota. So this is something that we have in place in our team to try and. So I'm blessed to have a really good team, and the reason we have a support rota is basically so that we don't all jump on production issues when they happen. Because otherwise that's kind of a waste of everyone's time if like 4 people are busy looking at the same issue at the same time. So what we have is a support rota so that we know that there's one contact person for that team for that day or week or year, however you want to work out your support rota. So that, first of all, everyone gets a chance, and secondly, so that everyone knows that it's someone's responsibility today and we don't have to worry about it too much. And this can be really helpful because it kind of it builds a shared ownership in your team of the issues that crop up, right? And the issues that crop up could be the home page is down, or it could be as simple as, hey, I had a user ask me a question that I don't know how to answer. Can you help me figure something out? Okay, chapter 4, right? So now we've found the body, we have gathered some clues, we've got our little team of detectives working correctly together, and now we need to go about actually fixing whatever issue it was that we found. Before we get into that, does anyone have any questions? Cool. Right. So the first thing that you need is a deployment pipeline. So here's the trick, right? I'm suggesting that you spend more of your energy trying to see what's wrong in production, right? I'm not going to spend any time talking about it today, but I've got some articles that you can go and read about how certain pre-production techniques are kind of a waste of time. And I would urge you to spend less time on, for example, functional testing or performance testing, and spend more time looking at issues in production. But the kicker is that if you do not have a deployment pipeline in place, that's going to be a really big issue for you, because you're going to find an issue in production and you're not going to be able to release a fix quickly. So it's really, really important, if we're going to say, okay, cool, we're going to learn about our system in production, that we actually have a way of changing what things look like in production reasonably quickly. Does that scare everyone? Is it like, how many people feel like they have a reasonable amount of able to push a production fix live within like a shortish space of time? Yeah, okay, cool. That's life, right? But that's encouraging at least to see that lots of people are getting there. So I think it's really important to work on your deployment pipeline. Does everyone know who this guy is? Yeah, that's cool. All right. So when you're faced with an issue, it's going to be important to decide whether you're going to undertake a full fix or a workaround. Yeah? And basically what you're going to try and decide here is, can I see what the issue is clearly enough? And can I fix the issue quickly enough to just sort it out now and be done with it? And if you can do that, then that's fantastic. But don't forget that there may be ways of patching up your system in the short term that would work well. And those workarounds are not something to be ashamed of. I think you should do what you can to get things patched up. And I think it's really important that you don't forget then to kind of get to the root of the issue and fix things correctly. And it is important as developers that we push back on people who don't have technical understanding when they say to us, okay, everything is working fine now, let's move on. Because you might say, I mean, the simplest way is just to say this is held together with sticky tape at the moment, we really need to fix this. And just to kind of make the risks obvious. So another thing to chat about, this guy. Anyone knows who this guy is? Right, anyone watch Due South? Cool, yeah. Now this is a cool detective. He licks the ground. Please don't lick the ground. But take a leaf out of his book and be really calm and, sorry, okay. So I do have a point here. And the point is that fixing issues related to data can be a bit scary, right? When you've got bad data in your system, it is often the kind, how many people here are afraid of data migrations, right? Yeah, it's a little scary. You could break your whole system in like 2 minutes flat, forever. That's not great. And I mean, I know that sysadmin tells you that he takes backups frequently, but do you really trust them? Anyways, so I'm going to pop over to my presenter notes over here, because I noted down a few things that you can do to stay calm when you're approaching having to fix some production data. So, the most important thing, I think, in terms of a principle with which to approach this, is try your best to give yourself the room you need to fix the data issue calmly and properly. So when things are urgent and red and angry, you're very likely to make a mistake because it's kind of like a high-stress situation. So first see, can I push a fix that helps my system cope with the bad data in an acceptable way? So for some reason there's some bad data in my system. Can I make it act okay? So even worst case scenario, that way of acting okay is displaying a message to the user saying, I'm sorry, this functionality is currently unavailable. It'll be back soon. Like that's kind of your worst case scenario, but you might be able to work around things in smarter ways. Is there a way for you to be able to have your system, it might be as simple as a line of code that says, okay, cool, check whether this is a string or an int and kind of deal with both cases, at least for now, and then kind of move on. So that's the one thing. Make your system cope with the bad data. If your system is producing bad data, is it possible for you to push a fix to stop it from doing that? And by doing this, what you've done is you've created yourself a little bit of room. You've now got a timeline which goes from whenever the bad data started happening to when you've managed to stop the bad data, and you've got those, it could be a week's worth of data, it could be 3 years worth of data, you don't know, that needs to be fixed, right? And outside of the brackets of that, you're kind of okay, right? So now you fixed your code, and now all that remains is to fix the data. And that can still be scary and daunting, but now we can approach it like any other piece of work. We can approach it as a team, we can talk about it a lot, we can test it thoroughly in our testing environments, and we can get a good idea of how our proposed fix is going to address the data. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Self-healing mechanisms is the last thing that I'll chat to you about quickly. Robocop. And basically, what I found really useful is when you have a support issue that crops up frequently. So if, for example, you have a downstream system that gives you upstream system that gives you a certain kind of bad data every once in a while. I'll give you an example. We recently had an issue where we were getting data from Salesforce in this system I was talking to you about just now. And for some reason, actually, what happened was the system that we integrated with didn't have delete functionality. And so even though we had the ability to, it had delete functionality. We had the ability to listen to its deletes and do the right thing, but we did not have the ability in place for those deletes to make it from them to us. And so the solution was our product manager kind of had to tell everyone who uses the other system, say, please don't delete anything for the next few weeks while we put that mechanism in place. And humans being humans, they deleted them anyways. So now, for months afterwards, we keep getting these messages that don't actually exist in our system anymore. So we say, okay, cool, we've got this message, we'll act on it, and then that system says, I don't know about this thing, it's been deleted. And we go, oh, right? And so it was really great because we had all the right alerting in place, so we could see that there was an issue. And we can go and deal with it. We can go manually fix the data, mark it as deleted. But we ended up doing this, I don't know, like 8 times a week, which was a real drain on our time and our energy. And so what you do, very simply, is you write some code to do that. If you get the message, if it looks like one of these things that have actually been marked as deleted, mark it as deleted automatically. And that's as simple as it be. Like when people think of self-healing mechanisms, they think of like crazy AI techniques of like, evolving your system and whatever. It's really as simple as automating the tasks, the support tasks that you normally have to do. Okay, so I am going to finish up here. Whoops, that's the wrong way. By reading you a small excerpt from The Murders at the Rue Morgue, which is the first detective story ever by Edgar Allan Poe. So, excuse the language, it's quite old, and excuse the gendering. It's 1841. He is fond of enigmas, of conundrums, of hieroglyphics, exhibiting in his solutions of each a degree of acumen which appears to the ordinary apprehension preternatural. So what this is talking about is about how, when you see Sherlock Holmes busy solving a mystery, it looks like he's just like an alien. He just knows things. His results, brought about by the very soul and essence of method, have in truth the air of intuition. So what I'm trying to say to you here is that if you see someone fixing bugs and really floating above it all and seem to really have control over things, there's no magic at play. All that's at play, and I think this is true of a lot of kind of software crafts aspects, is you have tools at your disposal. You've got techniques that you can use, and I've shared a few with you today, specifically relating to QA and production, that you can use to methodically work through issues. And by doing that and doing that often, you'll eventually get this kind of air of a master detective who knows what things are all about. But it's not all about just knowing the right thing to do. It's about having some methods to follow to get there. Right, time for questions. I think I have 3 minutes or so, but I'll stick around afterwards as well. Any questions? Yeah, there's one over there. Right, okay, I'm going to get away from the camera because I was way too close to it there. Sorry, viewers at home, for subjecting you to my face up close. So you were asked, the question was, in the auditing example I showed, was I keeping the previous state? Yes, and so I kind of have a, so this may seem like overkill, right? Every time someone updates something in your system, you grab the whole previous state and you shove it in your audit collection, right? So to date, in that particular audit collection, I do not think I've needed to use that. But having said that, storage is pretty cheap these days, and the nice thing about audits is that they're disposable. So if you just have a simple script that runs once a week and deletes any audits older than 3 months, it doesn't matter how much data you log. Throw as much stuff in there as possible, because you never know what might be useful. You could, but I wouldn't use auditing for backups. Like if you're using like Mongo, for example, like we're using there are actual techniques and products which will help you do proper backups of your system, replica sets, things like that. This is way too hokey pokey to use as like a real backup mechanism. Rather use what you're supposed to for that database. Yes?
From a logging perspective, I know it's a bit of a vague question, but what determines the differences between info, warning, and error? I mean, what's the difference between a warning and an error?
Right, so I actually have a very clear idea for me of what that means. So info is just information that you might go look at it if you had cause to, right? Any kind of noise can go there. It's just a noisy place, which, to be honest, I never really look. Warnings are things that you want to notice, right? So things that are not quite wrong, but you might want to pay attention when they start happening. And error means do something about it. And if it means anything less than do something about it, it shouldn't be in your error logs, because otherwise your error log is going to fill up with things that you don't do anything about, and then you won't ever do anything. The back there?
Easy question. Sherlock Holmes or Poirot?
My personal preference? Poirot. I mean, hey, he pulls it off, doesn't he? There's some real kind of... No? Okay. Yes, any other questions? I think I might be just about out of time. I'm out of time. Okay, I'll be here afterwards. Thank you very much.